Greetings, everyone, and welcome to our presentation today on preparing applications for the submission deadlines that are coming up fast, 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 fast. I'm Darren Worcester from EMA and admission.org, and I will be your host today. In a brief moment, I will introduce our featured guest. First, a few housekeeping notes. This presentation is made possible thanks to Gould Academy. If you're not familiar with Gould, they are a fantastic co-ed day and boarding school for grades 9 through 12 and postgraduate in beautiful Bethel, Maine. Gould excels in many areas, but if you're a snow person, particularly snow sports, you will love it in Bethel in the Gould region. A couple other things. We have a lot of registrants today, which is amazing. Thank you all for joining us, which also means we have a lot of questions. So what we're going to do today is we're going to try to answer the questions that tackle the greatest amount of people who have asked similar questions, etc. And if you have anything very specific to your situation, we recommend that you reach out to the school. That's a best practice anyway, as you're going to find that for a lot of questions, you may get different answers from the school. So definitely reach out to those. And if you have a specific question pertaining to the EMA and admission.org services, or if you're having trouble accessing something in our portal, please reach out to our support team ASAP. That's going to be the best bet for getting those answers. All right, so without any further ado, please allow me to introduce you to Kristen Kaschub. She's the Assistant Head of School for Enrollment at Gould. Kristen, thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you. I'm really glad to be here. Thank you for this opportunity.
Excellent. So, Kristen, a lot of the questions that we got really were pertaining around to what happens at the application deadline, what happens if I don't get these SSAT results in time, or if I don't get the recommendation letters all done in time. I'm requesting nicely, that these are in by January 15th, but maybe they won't be. Can you kind of describe the process of what happens as we lead up to application deadlines? What goes on at the schools once that deadline hits and everything thereafter?
Sure. I would say that the entire admissions process or the cycle actually starts in the summer, right before the actual season. So folks usually will visit schools, they'll go to open houses, they'll by October, November, they start to ask for their recommendations from various teachers and then requesting their transcripts. And then as we get into January, some schools will have a January 15th, some will have January 31st, some will have February 1st. Then that's where you're starting to get a lot of communication from the school. That'll be little nudges that say, "Oh, you're missing this piece. Don't forget about this piece." And hey, can we find a time where we can do an interview? And so those are your sort of moments to be, oh, I forgot that piece. I really need to get on that. And so you should have enough communication from the school itself to sort of give you a heads up on the timeline. Once the deadline happens, there might be a little bit of wiggle room in terms of days when pieces get in. They might allow for a couple days given mail or, school breaks, things like that. If you feel like you're coming up against an issue with a particular recommendation or getting your transcripts, or if your testing doesn't really align with the due date, always be sure to reach out to the school and give them a heads up in advance. That is your best practice.
I'm glad you brought up the testing piece because that was going to be one of my quick follow-ups. And it sounds like, what you're saying is in line with what we typically recommend is in that, yes, schools are willing to accept test scores after the deadline. They understand that if you're taking the January 3rd test, and the application deadline's the 15th, that, there's a day or two you may be getting it behind there. Kristen, what I did want to kind of point out though, is what you said is it is really important for folks to let the schools know, if they've got a January 1st deadline and you're taking the January 31st SSAT, that might be too far out, right? But it
I
may
would
be
agree.
acceptable for some schools.
It does depend on the school. Some schools will have a priority deadline, which is that initial deadline, and then move right into rolling admission. So it really just depends on the school. So it's very important that you're aware of the deadlines for various schools because, some schools are now doing early in December, which means that you really have to get on top of your application sooner than you might have anticipated or planned for. And then others are still in the realm of January or February 1st.
Thank you. That clears that up. Um, Another question a lot of folks ask is if for schools that have a hard deadline that aren't enrolling admissions yet, is there any benefit to submitting a couple weeks beforehand? Is there any advantage to that?
I wouldn't say so. I mean, I think that depending upon the volume that the school sees, they might start reading early, like a couple weeks early before the deadline hits, and that only just means that you get read before. You're not going to hear any sooner because most of them will adhere to the March 10th decision date. So it's really just for processes internally. So I don't know it necessarily benefits the individual by getting it in earlier.
Okay, into kind of what you were saying before, and I'm thinking if I were in this situation, I would be in that camp of submit it and then think, oh no, did I do everything right? Whatnot. So it kind of gives you that extra time of allowing the school to come back and say, oh, you missed this, or we got it. Everything looks great. We'll let you know further down the line as we review everything.
Right, because they're looking at to build classes, right? So they have to read every single application that they get. And there'll be various committees and review processes and people that are reading it. So that additional time helps internally, but it doesn't necessarily help in terms of it being an advantage for an individual.
Okay. And I know a lot of schools have signups for interviews online, that sort of stuff. As we get close to the deadline, those spaces might all be taken, and there might not be any opportunity to sign up. What can somebody do in that scenario?
So I would advocate for yourself and make sure that you reach out to your admission counselor, and explain that you're not seeing any additional spaces or times. But this also goes back to the planning of your application. So you need to look at it holistically. So when should I start looking and writing my essays? When should I be planning to do my interviews? Some people try and do it as late as possible, because they feel like they need to be testing or trying it out on people, or maybe their language skills are just making sure that they have the right answers. But you just need to be aware that you may come up against this issue where they might run out of spaces. But if you reach out to the school, they might have an alternative.
Good, thank you. One interesting question. Does the application process or timeline differ at all for athletes?
So this is an interesting question because it really does depend on the sport. I do think that those that are looking to play at a high level, they're usually in the process going to camps over the summer or camps throughout the year, or they're playing year round. They're being seen by coaches. They're coming to visit the particular coach, or they may have already had a conversation with the coach. Um, there isn't necessarily a different timeline per se, but you might get in the mix a little bit sooner in that you might be identified. So in order to do that, you want to make sure that you are setting yourself up and partaking in a lot of these camps or in any of these other opportunities where you might be seen by various coaches. There also may be the opportunity when you visit campuses that you might actually be able to get on the field, or in the case of Gould, you might get on the mountain with the team or on a mountain bike with the team, so we can see your level of ability.
Excellent. Thank you. One follow-up question. I had mentioned I would be nervous to submit the application button. How do they know when their application is ready to submit?
So the way that the portal is set up, you don't actually have to do everything at the same time. So you can tick off each parts of it as you can get it done. So your parents may have time to do their portion, you may have time to do a couple versions of your portion. You send out your recommendations to your teachers, and all of it comes in a timely fashion. But when you hit that submit button, that's when it all goes live to the school. So just know that, that you'll be able to see your progress within the portal, to be able to identify what's missing and also how much time you have to do it.
Great, thank you. In the whole process, getting the documents, everything submitted on time, where does the financial aid application process play into the fold?
So it really is a parallel process. So most schools will be using another platform for that process, and typically the admission process is happening in one lane, and then the financial aid is happening in another. And once you have started, or once you've completed your application, you will be reviewed on the application side, and if you're accepted, then your financial aid application will be reviewed to determine whether or not the school can meet you somewhere to make it possible. Typically, you would need to have all of that in by the application submission date. So you need to be sure that when you're applying, that your parents are gathering all of their tax documents and are able to sort of collect them all in one space and upload them to either Clarity or SSS, which are the two platforms that most schools will be using.
Excellent. Thank you. We did have a question just come in, and I was going to save this one for later, but it's top of mind now. So, asking about fee waivers for the applications. I know when using our application, the standard application online, the answer there is simply to go to the school and request the fee waiver. I presume that's the way to do it for any platform.
Pretty much. Schools tend to have a small bucket of fee waivers that they're able to allocate to individuals. So you would definitely need to reach out to each school, because in SAO, you will need to pay the application fee for each school that you're applying to. So you would need to reach out to every single school.
Correct. Yep. And when you do get a fee waiver from the school with the SIO, that also waives the nominal fee that we charge for the processing, that sort of stuff. So it would fully waive the application fees. All right. Back to our questions. Kind of big picture. Um, and we received a lot of questions of, how important is the interview? How important are test scores? How important are, name the piece of the application. Everybody wants to know how important it is. How does everything weigh against everything else? Can you kind of talk about, from the school standpoint, how you look at all these different pieces of the application puzzle?
Sure. We're really looking, it is literally a puzzle. So each facet of the application, recommendations speak to your academic prowess in the classroom, things that you may struggle with, things that are challenges, things that you really excel in. The portion that you complete tells us a little bit more about your interests, not only in the school that you're applying to, but also just at large. So your hobbies, your sports, maybe community service or Cub Scouts or you name it. It could be anything. Um, and then the interview is really where we're really looking to bring it all together because that gives us some of the nuance of what we read on paper. So I do think that the interview is very important, and it's very important in the sense that you don't want to necessarily regurgitate everything that you have said on the application because we can read that, right? So we've already know that piece of you. What we really want to know is how you are as a person and how you would join a community or how you would participate in various activities or aspects of our community. So I think what's important is that schools are really trying to build a class. So you need your athletes, you need your artists, you need the folks that are interested in STEM, you need folks that are community service driven. There may be students that have some level of academic support, and there may be students that need ESL, and that's okay. Not everybody needs to be perfect, right? So we all are there. It's all part of how we build a community. And so it's just important. And that's sort of one of the questions that came up was, I read that all these people are excellent at this or excellent at that. What if I'm just average? And it's okay, right? It is all about how will you be a part of the community that you say you want to join? And that is the biggest piece because a lot of schools can fill their school with bookworms, people that have straight A's and top scores. But what are the nuances of a student that actually build a community? And that's really what we're looking for is, are you able to join and are you invested and interested in doing so?
Great. Thank you for kind of providing that kind of broader understanding for how that all works. I'm getting a bunch of questions specific to the application, so more, I think, a statement here than necessary, but feel free to jump in, agree or disagree.
Mhm.
So people just asking which applications to use when schools accept more than one. I mean, my advice on that is really whichever is going to be easiest for you. So if you have multiple schools that are accepting the SAO and you can save time doing that, great. If you only have one school that's looking for the SAO, but multiple schools are accept another one, do the other one. Whatever is going to be the easiest path for you. If you have schools that accept both, you don't need to submit both. You can submit one or the other. Kristen, I think the way I will wrap this back around back to you is we see a lot of times where between the different common applications that are out there and the school's native application on their website, you know, I think people sometimes get nervous about using the SAO or another common application and think that they have a better chance with the school's application. Do you, from your end, have a preference on which application they use? Does it all look at all different to you?
So I would go back to the exact statement that you made, which is whatever is easiest, because, Gould has their own application on our website. But if you know that you want to go to Gould and that's the only school that you want to apply to, then do the Gould application. Does it indicate that you want to go to Gould more if you only do that and then you do everyone else's individual application? That's a lot of work. If there is a flexibility or opportunity to do one and then just pay the different application fees, that's easiest. And you can distinguish yourself in the way you speak about your interests and activities and the way that you spend your time. And then, of course, in the interview.
Excellent. Thank you. All right. So looking at, Gould is a boarding school, is there anything specific you look for in a boarding school student?
Well, I would say it is more about building that community. So you want to make sure that there is something that resonates with the community that you're applying to. So, for example, if you're applying to, if you really want to do horseback riding, and that is something that you've spent all of your time doing, any free weekend or any afternoon, you're doing horseback riding, and the school that you're looking at or that you're applying to doesn't really have a horseback riding program, or it might be something that is a possibility, but it's not necessarily, maybe that's not the school for you. And it might just be location as to why you're applying. So you want to make sure that you identify if it's not in the physical application itself, but in the interview as to why you're looking at that school. It is paramount that you know why you're applying and why you chose the particular school that you're applying to. If that means that you're writing individual emails or you're accentuating it in your individual interviews, then those are the spaces in which you do it. But it is imperative that you state why you want to go to that particular community. And as a community, we're looking for athletes, artists, people that can do lots of different things to create this robust community. International students, day students, boarding students. So it is sort of a puzzle in and of itself, trying to make the perfect class.
I like how you worded that because one of the follow-up questions I was going to give that came in live was somebody asked if there's a disadvantage to applying to predominantly boarding schools as a day student. But it sounds like that's part of the community that you're looking to build.
Yeah, it's just part of the picture. Yeah. Every school has a balance, whether it be 70-30, 10-90, whatever it is, of day students. There aren't many boarding schools that are 100% boarding. There might be some in Virginia, but I don't think there's a lot. So day students are a big piece of that community building as well.
Excellent. Um, what advice do you have for parents who are applying to a private or boarding school for their first time?
I think it is an overwhelming experience to be applying to boarding school. It feels more and more these days like applying to college. So it is like you can look at a bunch of websites and they all look the same. They all say it's character building. They all say holistic education. They all, they all speak to the different attributes that they have amongst their community and sort of their ethos. But I really think the best way to get a sense of a community is if you feel from reading what you've read that you feel like this could be a community for you, visit. The visit is so important for a community because you might get on campus and be like, "Oh, these aren't my people. Like I couldn't see myself here. Oh, they're too into this," or "I didn't know that was a part of the community." All of that really becomes real when you get on campus. But of course, use your resources. So you're looking at the websites, you're also looking at all the different review opportunities on the internet. So you can look at niche, you can look at all kinds of different um, sort of organic voices about the student experience or about the experience at large at a different school. But the visit itself, I think, is really whether or not you do it before you apply or a lot of schools will also have what they call revisit days or accepted students days, which this happens after you get accepted, that you go around and you visit all the different schools to see if which one is the best fit for you. So it doesn't always have to be before you actually submit an application. So just know, keep your options open. Maybe you apply to a handful of schools and then you visit three or you visit five. Whatever it is, just don't make it super complicated because the more complicated you make it, the more you get sort of stuck in anxiety about making the right choice. I do think there is something to be said for when you visit, you know, and you feel. And it's about the visit and it's about who you connect with in the admissions team.
Excellent. Yes, I am a big believer in just getting the feel and seeing the campus if at all that is a possibility for you to do. Another thing, we get a lot of questions about extracurricular activities and how much those matter. And I know you kind of answered some of this already with the statement earlier about the student who feels overwhelmed. But in terms of the specifically people asking about the EMA application, the SAO, and the interests and achievements piece, what typically do people add there? What's maybe going too in depth? What's kind of
Mhm.
the level of what you're looking for there?
Yeah. So I have seen tomes of things that students have been involved in from the time that they were, 5 years old to present. What I think is important is to really mention the things that you value and are committed to. So it doesn't need to be every single award that you've ever won in swimming if swimming is not what you're going to do in high school or college or beyond. So I just think it's important to really focus on the things that you value and that speak to you, whether that be church, it could be community service. It could be, you're taking afternoon arts class, or you really love making robotics, or you play Minecraft, or whatever it is. Make sure that you speak to the things that you think speak about you. And those things tend to be more recent, and they also tend to be the ones that you invest the most time in. So I wouldn't go overboard, but I would stick to the more recent and the things that you think sort of indemnify you.
Excellent. Thank you. So we've got a lot of questions coming up on letters of recommendations, the interviewing, of course, and we've got a lot of questions both coming in live and previously about the SSAT, and we'll kind of run through as many of those as we can get through. But before we do, I'd love to take a quick halftime break and learn a little bit more about Gould.
Oh, great. Love that. So where adventurous spirits find themselves. Gould Academy is actually located on a 450-acre campus in the beautiful town of Bethel, Maine. If anyone knows Bethel, Maine, it's located in western Maine, and one of its pride and joys is that we are connected to and very much a part of Sunday River. Sunday River is some of the best skiing in New England, and Gould actually has their own lodge on the mountain. This is our mission. Gould guides students to be creative, courageous, resilient, and to lead lives of fulfillment and purpose. It happens in many ways throughout everything that we do. So this is where we are on a map. We're about an hour and a half from Portland. We're 3 hours from Boston. What's great about having Sunday River in town is that it is a destination. So there is very much a robust town itself. And Gould is part of that town. We're only half a block away from a grocery store, from a coffee shop, from lots of different restaurants. There's a bowling alley and a movie theater. So there's lots of things that when students have free time, they can go explore. This is Gould by the numbers. So we're about 230 students from about 14 different countries and 19 different states, about 20% international, about 70% boarding, so predominantly boarding. It's about 50-50 boys and girls, plenty of leadership opportunities. And of course, as a college prep school, college is always in mind. So college placement is about almost everyone will go on to a 4-year college. It was founded in 1836. We offer a variety of athletics, and we focus on having smaller class sizes and a low student to teacher faculty ratio. So, as I was saying, there are many things to explore in town. And so, what's great about being in town is that students still have the ability to have some level of independence while they're on campus. A number of boarding schools don't have a lot of amenities near them. And Gould is not like that. We do offer the traditional American curriculum with APs and honor level classes and unique classes, including custom ski and snowboard building, and also blacksmithing. This is actually our main academic building. One of the things that we do focus on is we teach everything in a Harkness model, which means that it's very discussion based. So it's a lot of exchange back and forth with teachers and students. So people are really internalizing what they're learning and whenever possible, taking it outside the classroom and it's very experientially focused. So this is actually a photo of our 10th graders going to the coast and doing a lot of marine biology and sort of exploring some of the flora and fauna on the coast. But we also do it within our own little village and also within our community at large. We do have an ideas center, which is basically like a maker space where we have 3D printers. This is where robotics and programming. We also have a laser cutter and a wood shop. We do have a robotics club. In fact, they just had their first initial call with NASA because they just entered into the rover challenge. So this is the Mars rover challenge. So that's pretty unique for Gould and pretty exciting for our engineering students. We do have a signature program called the 4-Point program. This is where every single grade does something different in the month of March. In ninth grade, they will travel somewhere in the world, and this is a photo of that. They'll do 10 days where they do community service, cultural travel, and they'll even live with a host family. And then in 10th grade, they actually stay on campus and engage with our community and do community service here within the town of Bethel and the surrounding communities. But then we have Gould alumni that come back that are active in the arts as either their profession or their area of interest. And they'll work with the students and in a variety of different disciplines, and it will culminate in a showcase. 11th grade is the one that you'll always hear about, though. All of our 11th graders, it's actually a graduation requirement, will go camping in March for 9 days, 8 nights. And that is our sort of coming of age where students really realize that they are more capable than they ever thought possible. And then in their 12th grade, they will do a capstone experience, which could be an internship, an actual physical project, or sort of a project that they might be interested in doing. College counseling is a big piece of what we do on campus. It is a 4-year process for us. So we meet with our students in ninth grade and follow them through their years with us. Here are an example of some of the schools that our students will go to. Every year we have 70 to 90 different universities that visit campus, but then we also offer the opportunity for our students to go visit campuses. So on the weekends, students can sign up to go visit campuses and we'll bring them there. We do have an active and robust arts program, so all the visual arts as well as the performing arts, everything from theater to music to voice. And we also have a partnership with the Manhattan School of Music. For those that are on the higher end of things, they can continue at that level with us as well. We do have a wide range of athletic facilities. We have everything from this is a trampoline room with a foam pit so you can practice your flips and tricks for skiing. We've got rock climbing, we've got indoor skate park, we've got an indoor tennis court, indoor basketball court. We also have 40 kilometers of trails in our own private mountain. We also have, soccer and baseball and softball and all kinds of, but mountain biking is a big one. So because of those 40 kilometers of trails, and we also have a mountain nearby called Mount Abram that we partner with, and there's a lift that they can practice over and over and over again doing mountain biking. And then, of course, Sunday River. We have all kinds of winter sports. So we've got students that are going on the world stage. We have students that just want to do interscholastic sports, but then we also have students that just want to learn to ski or learn to snowboard. Then we also have an instructor training course. And something that's really unique to Gould is you can actually get jacketed in ski patrol, which is we're the only school in the country where you can get jacketed. There's also non-competitive options. So if you just want to ski, you can do all mountain. Then, of course, there are dorms on campus. This is a big part of boarding life. This is a typical dorm room with a bed and a desk and a dresser, and the bathrooms are down the hall. And, there's a kitchen and lounge and laundry facilities. And then, of course, a dining hall where everyone has all of their meals. And then we do have a robust student life here on campus where we sort of we group students in what we call notches because we're in the mountains. So we ensure that we keep that theme going. And so we do competitions throughout the year, anything from trivia nights to winter carnival to spring carnival. So it's a really great, it's just a fun way to sort of do things as a community and get to know each other. And of course, we do accept the SAO, and this is the application process for us. You can see the various things that we require here. It's pretty similar to most schools and pretty similar timeline to most schools. February 1 with a March 10 decision date. And then of course, after that, it becomes rolling. And then this is me. So I'll just stop sharing. We can get back to all your questions.
Excellent, Kristen. Thank you very much for that. I love how you kind of talked about the non-competitive snow sports or just wanting to learn to ski, that sort of stuff. I think Gould is so well known for the high-end competitive alpine programs that from an outside perspective, you can kind of lose track of it's a school. It's not
Right.
just it's not
We're,
just
yep. A school with a great ski program, but we also have mountain biking, we also have theater. So it's a wide range of things.
And I would definitely say for parents out there, Bethel is a beautiful, quaint town to go visit for parent weekends and things like that. So you can definitely do much, much worse in where you're going to travel to.
It's true.
Um, all right. I will say I am biased though with the Bethel region. All right. Moving back to our presentation, one question that I kind of skipped over accidentally is, a lot of folks are always wondering when we were talking about the anxiety over the application is there a common mistake that you see, something that they can kind of make sure they're avoiding, or something that they can kind of try to help their application out by paying close attention to?
When we look at the essays, one of the things it is sort of telling if someone if it's too brief. If it's too brief, it sort of indicates that you're not putting a whole lot of effort into it. If it's too long, then it's too much. So there is sort of that little just right. I would say make sure that you do spell check and that you're looking at grammar because we are spending time reading this. And if you were not showing that you can actually put together a proper essay, then it is indicative of other things.
Excellent. Moving to letters of recommendations. One person, asked, is it helpful to get additional recommendations beyond, what the school requires?
I think in some instances it could, for example, from a coach or like if there's an area that you're super passionate about, then it might make sense. I don't think it makes sense to have everyone in your family give a recommendation because in a lot of respects they are slightly biased. So you want to make sure that it's something that if it's something that you're passionate about that's outside of school, or if you have a tutor who really knows you well in an area of interest, like say you're doing computer science programming on the side and you've been doing it for years and you want that person to speak to that particular interest, then I would do that. I wouldn't overdo it though, because they do ask for the common ones. So it's English, math, and usually either one of your choice or some say counselor and some say principal. So I think we get a good smattering on the academic side. The ones that might give a better perspective of you as a person would be somebody that knows you in areas of your interests.
Excellent. And what would your recommendation be for folks who are at, typically this, I think, happens at some public schools if they have a policy not to write letters of recommendations for private schools?
Yeah, this is becoming more, it is definitely an issue overseas in some countries, but it's also becoming an issue at some schools domestically. Sometimes if your school has midterm reports that actually have narratives attached to them, those can serve as good indicators or good, they could be telling in terms of how you are in the classroom, which is really what the recommendation is meant to convey. You do need to speak to each school though, because they each have individual ways in which they go about this. Some may say, oh, like there's always an instance where somebody's on maternity leave, or they've only had this teacher for 2 months and they've had this other teacher for 3 years. If they ask for the current year teacher, you need to get the current year teacher. However, if you feel like there may be somebody else who can speak to that same discipline, feel free to include that. But I would not go overboard and get another one for every single discipline and every single area of interest. So some folks will have a tutor write a recommendation. They might have, um, again, some area of interest that they are passionate about, like whether it be a coach or a pastor or somebody that knows them in another capacity. I would run it by every single team. So I would run it by your admission counselor at the various schools before you go headlong into asking people to write recommendations because it is an ask.
I'm glad you ended with that because I was going to say this sounds very much in our caveat at the beginning of definitely in that type of situation, ask the school.
Yeah.
Um, we talked a bit about the student essay and checking grammar, things like that. Make sure you're doing that. What do you look for in a student essay? What kind of stands out to you?
I actually love creative ones that take a moment that is important to them and speak to it within their essay because that makes them real, right? It really is telling and it tells me a little bit more about what makes them tick and what they value. Um, I think that, it's very easy to sort of go online and say, give me a summary of a book and then use that, but make sure it actually speaks to you, not just a canned response that you can sort of maybe change a few words online. It's very important that it's personal because this is your opportunity to speak about you. And if they meet a different person in the interview that isn't represented in your essays, that is very telling. So it has to be you. It has to speak to you and your values.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So we also got a lot of questions around the parent statement and the parent essay. And I think the biggest question, or if I distill what everybody's really asking, is as parents, we obviously love our children and we could go on and on and on. How much is too much? What level of details, the right level of detail should we be getting into?
I mean, it sort of goes back to that achievement section as well. Like, we don't need to know everything from kindergarten to now, but I do think what's important is to speak to the person that they are or that and why they're ready for this experience. And I think that that is really what is most critical within those parent portions is to speak to why this decision has come up, why you think this is important for them, and what you hope that they will get out of it, because that again not only speaks to them as students and what they value, but also you as a family. What do you value? Because remember, it's not just the student that we're accepting, it is the whole family.
I saw an interesting question come through the live Q&A before, and we know a lot, as you've been saying, is students being able to express themselves and kind of share some insight into who they are, as well as expressing interest in the school and letting why I would be interested in, or I'm interested in Gould, that sort of stuff. But an interesting question came in. What if the child doesn't necessarily know that the community is going to be the great fit for them? It's the parent who knows. So maybe can you talk a little bit about, the difference between, when the student's driving the bus and the parent driving the bus and what that ultimately kind of could mean for the student's fit in the community?
I think this is an interesting moment where there are kids that are going through the process where the parents pick the schools, and there are kids going through the process where the students also have some autonomy in the process. And I think it's important to balance both because they may know their student, but at the end of the day, if it's not the right fit, it could go south. Everybody wants to make sure that it's a good fit. So I think that this goes back to doing your, research, and whether it be visiting campuses, speaking with current families, asking if maybe there's somebody who actually went to that school that is part of your swim team or is on the baseball team, or I find that the more people talk about the fact that they're looking at boarding school, the more they actually realize that people know more about boarding school than you think. So I think it's important that you do your due diligence and not just say you're going to apply to this school, because if teens are really great self-saboteurs, if they don't want to do it, they'll find ways not to do it. Right. And so you want to make sure that they're 100% bought in the process and in the potential of the school. And really, the best way to sort of sell your child on it is to go visit or have them talk to somebody who went there or currently goes there. And most admission offices would be happy to connect you with people, whether it be one of the tour guides or somebody that's in your region or in your country. Just ask. They're happy to do that.
Excellent. Another question that we always kind of comes up with these in terms of, writing, talking about the parent statements and the interviews is, should parents bring up and discuss if children have learning plans or learning differences? I think parents are often cautious to kind of present that information because they're worried about hurting their chances to get in, but you also started doing a great job of talking about, finding the right match. So can you talk a little bit about, why it is important to have those conversations?
I think it is crucial to have those conversations because any of the progress that someone that has a learning difference or a learning challenge, all the progress that they've made to date could be completely sidelined by going into the deep end of a school that doesn't have the supports that they need to be successful. So I think one that goes back to doing the due diligence and making sure that if you know that your student needs extended time, or your student might need a one-on-one whatever it may be, a tutor or preferential seating, or there's a whole number of supports that any school could offer. You want to make sure that the schools that are on your list have those services or have that ability to support the child. And I don't necessarily think that it hurts your chances. What I do think is more important is that you ensure that the program that you're looking at for your child does have the support structures to make them successful, because nobody wins when it doesn't, when it's not there. So I think that, there are ways that we can sort of, read between the lines in terms of what teachers are saying, or teachers may say, they're not as great on time management, or sometimes they ask to do this, or, there's ways in which we can sort of get at, well, is there something else going on here? Um, but I think it's important that the admission officer or counselor and the family or the parents are on the same page to ensure fit and match.
Excellent. Thank you. Always love to have that conversation as part of this. Let's move into what I'll call the SSAT portion of the presentation, because there's a lot of questions in there. And I know we talked about this at the beginning in terms of understanding how all things factor into the application, but it gets asked so many times, people join late. Can you again kind of talk about how important SSAT scores are in the big picture of everything you're reviewing?
Sure. So there are a number of schools out there that, I mean, because, okay, let's back up. During COVID, there was a moment where it was sort of, flexible whether or not schools were requiring SSATs. Since COVID, a number of schools have gone back to requiring it. And while also there are a number of schools that have said it's not required or it's voluntary. So if you've taken it, sure, send it. It's always important to have that information. I think that again, it's just another data point to better understand the individual as a student. Not everybody is a good tester. So I think that it's important that we balance that. So if they're a really good student, but they didn't do well on their testing, it's important to speak to that in somewhere in the application or in the interview. But I think it's just another data point, really. If there are big differentials between the English portions and the math portions, there might be something else going on there. Also, something to speak to in the application or in the inquiry process.
Excellent. So it's part of the story, it's not the story.
It's not the story.
All right. So with that frame in mind, we have questions about how to prepare for the SSAT. And for me, I kind of think of that in terms of, time of year, in that, with application deadlines coming up, people are taking the test, there's not a lot of time at this time of year to prepare. So, my advice on that would be to take our free 30-minute
Yeah.
practice test, and that will kind of give you a report on, where the student is doing good, where they, could use some studying and some practice, that sort of stuff. So that will kind of allow you to focus on areas where you can have some improvement. Any other tips that you can think of? Putting you on the spot after giving the good one.
I mean, I think that practice tests are a really great place to start. It also gets you more into sync of the way that questions are framed, because standardized test questions are different than everyday questions. I don't know how they get to be more everyday questions, but they just are different. So getting used to the format is probably the biggest challenge. And then you can start to work on the content.
Exactly. We've had some questions about how difficult the test is, that sort of thing. I think the important thing for everyone to understand, and for parents to kind of cascade down to your students, that hopefully should help alleviate some nerves when it comes to taking the test, is that the test is supposed to be difficult. It's supposed to find everyone's upper limit, right? Like, so every student is going to encounter questions, likely many questions that are outside, their range of what they
Mm.
know and understand. So that's normal. Everybody's going to hit that. The test is not doing its job if somebody gets a perfect score. Right. So that's kind of the premise or how the test is angled. So I think, have those conversations in advance with your students, can help calm them down and get them in a good place of mind for when they take the test.
But
Um,
also know that the scores are targeted by your grade. So
yeah,
meaning like you are benchmarked against your peers. It's not universally like if you're in eighth grade, you're not being benchmarked against 11th graders.
that's a great point. That somebody else had asked that. So if you're applying, to high school in the ninth grade as an eighth grader, you're taking the same upper level test as kids in 10th grade applying to the 11th grade. So naturally, it's not expected that you're going to know some of the same information that they're going to know. You just simply haven't learned it yet.
Mhm.
So you are benchmarked against other kids in your grade. We also had questions for single most effective test taking strategy that can immediately impact their SSAT score. And I feel like we could answer this one Family Feud style because I have a couple different responses to that. But is there anything for you that you could think of?
I mean, I think that math, I mean, just get again, I think getting used to the way that these questions are asked, I think is going to be once you get to a comfort level of that, you can actually get at the content, right? So it's the same thing with SATs. Like when you go in and you read an SAT math question, it feels different than when you're in class. So you need to get used to having a multiple choice and how they're asking the questions.
Yeah, that's great. And I mentioned before our practice test, if you continue on into the paid tests, we do have four full-length tests that they can practice in there. I forget to, I give you the good answer clap for the Family Feud style. A few things that I would add to that, part of it is just making sure that the student gets a good night's sleep, right? The night before the test, there's not much more they can do at that point. A good night's sleep is going to be a lot better than cramming, a good breakfast. And I know we're getting into the parents nodding things you're going to say to your child and you're going to get the eye roll. So just tell your children that the dude from admission.org said this is what they need to do. But definitely a good breakfast. And go to the bathroom before you go into the test room. Like take that break. You don't want to have any distractions once you're in the test room. So that would be my sort of test day advice, on top of doing the preparations and things like that.
But also know that you can take it more than once, as long as you plan. Like if you wait to take the one in January and that's the only one you take, and you're not certain if you're a good standardized test taker, that's probably not the best strategy.
So a couple good follow-ups to that. One, do you accept super scoring?
We actually we're test, optional. So we don't, I mean, if folks are sharing them, that's wonderful. But I actually love the essays. That's my favorite part because it's really organic writing when I see the test results. Um, but yeah, so I mean, every school's different, and I would make sure that you read the fine print and what they expect for the testing.
You gave me a great follow-up question. I'm going to want to ask, how do we know when to submit and not? But the one other thing before I get to that, that I did want to say in regards to taking the test more than once, because really that is the best practice. So, if you're in on this process early and you can do that, that's great. The one thing I would say, the caveat is that um, we do see improvement when students take the test the second time, but that improvement is relative to how they did the first time. So if a student's up in the 80th percentile, they're probably not going to improve by much, if at all, right? So there's scenarios there where taking the test a second time probably isn't worth it. It's just adding extra stress on the student that ultimately isn't going to pay off in the long run. So situations where your students taking the test and they can do better. Maybe they were nervous, maybe they were sick. There's other factors that kind of come into play. Those are the situations where taking the test the second time could pay off. And speaking of that, so as test optional, what do you recommend to families on how would they know when it's a good time to submit and when it's not?
I mean, I think people tend to be pretty proud of really high scores. And so they're probably willing to share those more than sort of average scores. Um, so I mean, it's just like anything else. I mean, use your best judgment. If you feel like at a test optional school that having the test scores that your child has obtained is going to be a value add to the application, then certainly send them. If you feel like it might be a detriment, then don't.
Yeah, that's in line with usually what we hear folks saying. If they hold their test scores out, I know a lot of schools often, look at test scores for other things like course placement and that sort of stuff. Would you recommend that families submit the scores later on after admittance and that sort of stuff? Is it something you would look at then?
You can. Again, it depends on the school. Like, for example, we will try and use on our recommendations, it sort of says what level math are they in, what would be their next placement. For non-native speakers, it would also say, where they are in comparison to their peers in terms of English. And then if I saw their writing on their SSAT, then I would know how they are in terms of ability to write. But we also do require English proficiency testing. So there's a few other sort of benchmarks that we can use. And for international students in particular, they will all do a math placement and they will all do a language placement, an English language placement. If English is not their first language and they haven't been in a international school or learning in English for at least 2 years. So it depends on the school. I would just double check.
One quick question I saw somebody asking about if they're reclassing coming in, will their SSAT scores be compared with their current class or the class they're reclassing with? That will depend on the grade you select when you take the test.
Yeah.
So ideally, if you know you're reclassing, select the grade that you're reclassing for. All right, so that's kind of puts us to the end of our time. The one question I always love to end on here, if there's one big takeaway that you hope everybody remembers from this presentation, what do you hope that would be?
To really give this process the time that it requires, meaning do your research beforehand. When I look at sort of our stats as to when folks start to look at schools and start the process in earnest, it's 18 to 24 months out. So that was when you sort of put your toe in the water and you're like, oh, maybe boarding school is for me. And you start looking at boarding schools. And then maybe you go to their websites and then maybe you visit one or two of the summer. Maybe you go to a summer school, maybe you go to a camp. So just give it the time that it needs and try and use your resources, whether it be people in your community, ask for alumni, ask for current students. But I also would implore you to ensure that whichever path you do choose, that you ensure that it is a good match for your child. Because if it's not, it's never a good thing. So that's why I always encourage people to visit, whether it be before their decision or after their decision. I think visits are really crucial.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Christian, for your time today. Greatly appreciate it. For everyone who attended the presentation, thank you very much as well. We wish you all the best in the application process and hope you all have a wonderful holiday season.
Thank you so much. Thanks for
All
taking
right.
the time.